You can choose the panelists whom you would address the question, or you may also leave it blank and then type your question. Okay, and then click submit button when you finish your typing your question. You can also click the like button on any question listed that has already listed. You can click like, and then the most liked question will prioritize to answer first. Okay. Okay, thank you. I give the floor back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you very much. I just learned it today, and then proudly it's been successful. Yeah, good. Okay, now we have a presentation from Ms. Jan Mead from the Australian National Audit Office. She is the Group Executive Director in the Professional Services and Relationship Groups of the Australian National Audit Office. She will present how QA systems can enhance Supreme Audit.
Thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk to you today. It's an honour to be here, and lovely to be in this beautiful Bali. It's a very, very beautiful place. I wish I could spend longer here. I'm going to talk now, I guess, from the auditor's point of view about the importance of quality when we're auditing things such as sustainable development goals. So, is this working? Sorry. That's okay, thank you. All right, I think I'll try and get the technology working. Doesn't like me, I don't think. There we go. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about the role that Supreme Audit institutions play in promoting transparency and accountability, which is, I guess, the most important role of a SAI. And then to talk about how quality systems that the SAI implements can then enhance the impact that the SAI has in promoting transparency and accountability. And then with reference to elements of quality systems that SAIs have in place, I'd like to talk about what type of quality considerations we make when we're auditing emerging areas such as sustainable development goals. It really doesn't like me. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So firstly, just to look at the role of SAIs in promoting transparency and accountability. So Supreme Audit Institutions, or SAIs, play a very important role in promoting transparency and accountability of governance. So this is noted in the Inter-SAI standard ISAI 100, where it states that SAIs play an important role in enhancing public sector administration by emphasising the principles of transparency, accountability, governance and performance. And there is an Inter-SAI guidance note as well, according to SAI P12, and it talks about the value and benefits of SAIs in making a difference to the lives of citizens. And this standard notes that public sector auditing is an important factor in making a difference to the lives of citizens. SIs promote the efficiency, accountability, effectiveness and transparency of public administration. And importantly, an independent, effective and credible SI is an essential component in a stable democracy. So the extent to which a SI is able to make a difference to the lives of citizens and playing their role will depend on a number of factors. Firstly, it depends on how well the SI is able to strengthen the accountability, transparency and integrity of government public sector entities. Secondly, on how well the SI is able to demonstrate ongoing relevance to citizens, the Parliament and other stakeholders. And also, importantly, by being a model organisation through leading by example. And this diagram basically shows that. So it just shows those factors feeding into the ability of a SI to make a difference to citizens. InterSci P12 outlines 12 principles for SI making a difference to the lives of citizens. 7 of these relate to how SIs go about strengthening the accountability and transparency and integrity of government, and the 5 others relate to SIs leading by example. So what I wanted to do was to tie these principles into quality systems and therefore talk about in auditing how quality can help to increase accountability and transparency. So some of the principles that are talked about that are of relevance here are Principle 1, which talks about safeguarding the independence of SIs. And as we all know, SI independence is crucial to the impact of SIs. And as noted in the Lima Declaration, supreme audit institutions can accomplish their tasks objectively and effectively only if they are independent of the audited entity and are protected against outside influence. Principle 11 talks about striving for service excellence and quality, and this is where we're able to tie in the concept of quality and how important that is in SIs being able to have an impact. Other important principles are Principle 12, which talks about capacity building, and that's through promoting learning and knowledge sharing, which is what we're doing today, so it's a very important principle for SIs. So these principles demonstrate the clear link between audit quality and independence and the ability of a SI to have an impact. And at the ANAO, we've actually defined audit quality in those terms. So we've talked about independence, value of what we do by the Parliament, and how what we do is able to lead to improved public sector performance through accountability and transparency. I wanted to now move on to quality systems for SIs, and as I said, Principle 11 of InterSci P12 talks about striving for service excellence and quality, and it references the standard ISI 140 as the relevant standard to apply. And ISI 140 is based on the key principles of ISQC1, which most of us are familiar with. And ISI 140 notes that for a system of quality control to be effective, it needs to be part of each SI's strategy, culture and policies and procedures. So in this way, quality has to be built into the performance of the work of each SI and the production of the SI's reports, rather than just being an additional process that we put on at the end of audits. So most people would be familiar with the elements of the quality framework under ISQC1. And I wanted to now talk about some of these elements and how we need to consider these when we're auditing emerging areas, such as auditing sustainable development goals. So the first one I wanted to talk about was audit mandate and selection as a specific consideration when we are auditing sustainable development goals and other emerging areas. So as we're aware, the scope for any audit will depend on the SI's mandate. With particular reference to the audit of sustainable development goals, there is actually quite a wide scope for performing audits, but it will depend on the mandate of each SI. So some SIs will have a specific mandate in respect of sustainable development or the environment. Some may have mandates, though, that are confined to financial or compliance audits, Others may extend to being able to perform performance audits or other types of comprehensive audits. So therefore, in this way, the mandate may dictate the type of audit that can be performed. Some mandates of size might be limited to the national government. Others, however, may extend to regional and local government and to state-owned enterprises. So that then becomes important in auditing sustainable development goals depending on the level of government that is actually tasked with implementing those sustainable development goals. Some mandates may also be entirely retrospective, so they may only allow auditing when something has already occurred rather than looking into the future. So, for example, in the past we may be able to look at plans for implementation and then the implementation to date. However, other mandates may allow us to do pre-audit reviews of pre-implementation and also audits of things like budgets. Mandates will also determine whether the objective of the audit can focus on economy, efficiency or effectiveness. So therefore it's really important when SIs are looking at audits such as sustainable development goals to consider their mandate to determine whether they actually have the authority to conduct audits in that field. In most cases, if a SI has power to look at economy, efficiency and effectiveness, they will then have a sufficient mandate to scrutinise most aspects of sustainable development. We'll get there. Lost it completely now. I'll get you to bring that back up for me, thank you. I'll keep talking while they bring the slides back up. So the next area I wanted to talk about was standards that we apply in conducting audits, for example, of sustainable development goals. So it's necessary and important to note that all the usual standards that we apply in our auditing will apply when we're auditing areas such as sustainable development goals. So that means we may follow inter-size standards, we may follow national standards, but all the normal standards we follow in terms of planning, gathering evidence, analysing and reporting will still apply. However, it's also important to know that whatever standard we apply may then impact the way that we're able to report on the audit. So when we're looking at areas such as audits of sustainable development goals, a key area is likely to be looking at how governments measure their performance and progress against those goals. So therefore, the strategies that the governments have in place usually include targets for what needs to be achieved and indicators or performance measures for measuring their progress towards meeting those targets. So they're often going to be an important area for the side to look at in audits of sustainable development goals. So in terms of auditing sustainable development goals, SIs can focus their audits on three fairly broad areas. Firstly, there may be an audit of the targets, so looking at the targets that the government has set to see if they're realistic and based on appropriate evidence. It may be an audit of indicators, so we may look at the indicators that are used to measure progress to determine whether those indicators are relevant and reliable. Or it may actually be an audit of the progress against those targets where we'll compare the indicators, so what we're seeing in terms of progress with those targets. So the area that we focus on will determine what the objective of the audit is, and then the audit questions we will ask as part of that audit. In cases where the government hasn't yet set up a framework for measuring performance against their targets, it may be necessary for a site to be limited to audits of individual programs. And this is the case in a lot of jurisdictions. I'll keep going even though we haven't got any slides. You'll just have to picture that I've got a nice little picture and I'm now talking about engagement performance. Audit work program will look like, what areas they're going to audit. That will be done as part of that. A really important part when we're auditing, emerging areas is that we need to consider the methodology that we're going to apply in those audits. So one of the crucial factors that we then need to consider there is how auditable the area we're looking at is. I'll keep going. Oh, we're nearly there. Great. If we can just go back one more, that'd be great. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about in terms of making sure that quality underlies these audits that we're doing and therefore helps us to have the greatest impact is to talk about building capacity and expertise, particularly when it's a new area that we're auditing. So it's necessary to figure out how we're going to actually build that expertise. It may be that a site users builds up specific expertise in a team that will just audit something like sustainable development goals, or they might try and have all auditors across the organisation skilled to do that. Also, in terms of building capacity, one of the key things to do is to talk to other SIs, to network with other SIs and share information, which we're all able to do through the InterSci network. So the next slide that's up now just talks about, I guess because we're talking about there is a clear link between quality of the SI's audits and the impact that that site can have in promoting transparency and accountability, it's also important then to monitor quality when we are auditing new areas. So this may consist of doing hot reviews or real-time reviews in new areas so that we can assess the quality as we go along with the audit. It also helps us to refine methodology and some of our tools along the way as well. It's also really valuable when we are auditing new areas that after an audit we conduct post-implementation reviews to look at lessons learned in conducting that audit, which can then feed into methodology improvements in the future. Next slide. What I wanted to talk about, and I'll do this fairly quickly because I'm conscious of time, is just a little bit about a case study in Australia. So in Australia, sustainable development is a shared responsibility across different levels of government and also the non-government sector. The Auditor General is responsible for assessing efficiency, economy, effectiveness and ethics of Australian government entities at the national level. And so we don't have jurisdiction at state or local level in their design and delivery of programs and policies. And some of those programs and policies contribute to sustainable growth. So we audit a range of Australian government programs and activities that may either directly or indirectly promote economic growth, social inclusion and environmental protection. We haven't as yet, as an office, audited the Australian government's implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals because there's a lack of auditability of a framework that's set up there for measurement. We will consider whether we would do an audit in the future as part of our work program. However, what we do is we do conduct performance audits that are relevant to some of the outcomes of Sustainable Development Goals. So particularly in relation to service delivery and infrastructure construction. Normally we conduct these under the Auditor General's performance audit mandate. So what I thought is in the absence of having audits of implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, it would be really worthwhile just to talk about another emerging area which has some things in common with Sustainable Development Goals. So this is audits that we've done of performance statements in the Australian Government. And these cross entities such as education, jobs and environment who have responsibility for achievements in SDG areas. So we've performed a number of audits in relation to performance statements that Australian government entities are required to prepare each year. And what we do in these audits is, as I talked earlier about looking at where we would look at auditing the indicators that entities have in place. This is the type of audit that we do here. So in doing these performance statement audits, I'm just going to very tie quickly back to how we looked at those factors that I've just talked about. So the first step was to work out where our mandate's at. And we determined that under our Act, our mandate would be to do performance audits of performance statements. We apply the ANAO auditing standards that apply to performance audits. The scope is probably the important part of these. So as I said, we're looking partly at compliance with the requirements of legislation, partly at the appropriateness of performance indicators, which I referred to recently, and there we're saying, are they relevant and reliable, and also the effectiveness of reporting frameworks. We selected a number of entities to conduct these audits in. We set up a new methodology to audit these that was in accordance with standards. In terms of building capacity, we started very small, looking at small parts of these performance statements, doing a pilot, and we also leveraged from the work of other officers. What we did then was did some post-implementation reviews where we were able to consider changes to the methodology that may be required, and we've been evolving that methodology along the way with our lessons learned. So I'll complete there in the interest of time, and happy to take any questions in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Jan Mead. Before we continue with the next presentation, let us check how many questions that has been submitted by the audience. Could you please show us how many questions? It's not to be answered now, but to check the progress of questions that already been submitted. We have a lot of questions for Dr. Budianto. But then, already question for Mr. David Obong. How many we have already? Okay, good. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, the administrator. Now we continue with presentation from academic point of view. We will have Professor Dr. Eko Prasojo. Now the Dean of Faculty of Administrative Science at the University of Indonesia. Professor Eko will present about the role of academics in supporting the governance and accountability of state finance to promote sustainable development. Some point that I read from his long experience presented in Long City. He was the Vice Minister of Administrative Reform in the Republic of Indonesia in 2011 until 2014. He graduated from Faculty of Social and Political Sciences at University of Indonesia, and then Research Master and Doctor degree from University of Speyer, Germany, and then become professor in year 2006. And he is now the Dean, as I mentioned before. He has published several books, several journal articles, presented papers in many international conferences and seminars. And this is a very excellent achievement from him. He received the highest medal, Bintang Mahaputra Utama, from the government of the Republic of Indonesia in 2014 as the appreciation to his service as Vice Minister for Administrative Reform. So ladies and gentlemen, the audience, please welcome Professor Dr. Eko Prasojo. Prof, your time, please.
Good morning, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'd like to thank to BPK for inviting me to be speaker here in this international conference. It is my honor because I think for a long time that BPK is the most powerful state organs in this country to encourage and to push the administrative reform or governance reform in Indonesia. So I think this is the right moment to say that BPK should be playing more active and significant role in supervising and also monitoring the SDGs as a priority of National Development Growth for the next 5 years. So my title of presentation will be the role of academics in supporting the governance and accountability of state finance to accelerate Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers, as mentioned by Pak Arif Rudianto, that SDGs has partnership platforms in these implementations. I think there are 4 important sectors who involved in implementation of SDGs. So governments and the parliamentary organ has role to develop policy, regulation and activities alignment, providing data and information, also funding to APBN and also to APBD. Private sector and philanthropy has role to advocate the governments in implementing SDGs, as well as to facilitate program and activities by the private sector and through the funding from the private support. And academician and professional, I think they are conducting policy research in order to get and provide information, data and knowledge in developing of policy in implementing of SDGs, and also helping the governments to monitor and to evaluate the results of goals and also target of SDGs. So helping the governments to build the capacity of civil servants or public servants, and also by establishing SDG center at the universities. And also the role of TSO and media and society, also campaigning the SDGs agenda to promote social enterprise, so enterprise that promoting social welfare, but also the advocating of SDGs. I think it's time to establishing so-called P5, public-private people philanthropist partnerships in supporting and also implementing the SDGs programs. Ladies and gentlemen, since the beginnings, the nature of SDGs is very